This is CBN NewsWatch.
And welcome, I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Ukrainian forces retaking a key area around the capital city of Kyiv as Vladimir Putin unleashes more fury, including high-tech missiles. As refugees pour out of Kyiv, we're going to hear about the devastating impact this invasion is having on the orphans of Ukraine. How the war in Ukraine could come home to the United States amid warnings Russia could launch cyber attacks. But experts say the U.S. is not ready. And a major controversy in college sports as a transgender swimmer wins an NCAA championship. But parents are protesting as the issue takes a legal turn. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with the war in Ukraine, where Ukrainian forces have retaken a strategically important suburb of the capital city of Kyiv. And with Russian forces stalled in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has been unleashing more fury on their cities, using high-tech missiles to avoid Ukrainian defenses. Jenna Browder is on this story.
From Kyiv to Kherson, the Russian military is stepping up its devastating attacks on cities across Ukraine. The White House calls it a sign of Vladimir Putin's frustration.
The more his back is against the wall, the greater the severity of the tactics he may employ.
The Kremlin now resorting to more extreme tactics, like using hypersonic missiles, which can hit targets more than 1,000 miles away at up to 10 times the speed of sound. Kyiv is under a 35-hour curfew due to increased attacks from the air. Nevertheless, Ukrainian forces say they've retaken a key suburb of the capital from the Russians. In Kherson, a show of defiance as civilians protest the Russian occupiers. Video shows Russian forces firing stun grenades on them. It comes as President Zelenskyy tightens his grip on political parties and media in an effort to control misinformation. Zelenskyy invoking emergency powers under martial law to temporarily ban activities by 11 political parties and combining all national TV channels into a single information platform. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis continues to worsen, with 10 million displaced people, about half of them children. And the president will travel to Brussels on Wednesday for a high-stakes NATO summit. The White House says he'll also visit Poland on Friday. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Our senior international correspondent George Thomas is now with us from the Ukrainian capital. George, Ukraine says it's retaken the city of Mykolaiv near Kyiv. You were in that area last week. What does this say about Russia's land offensive?
Yeah, Ephraim, I was there last week, and there were intense battles between Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces. In essence, it was a strategic city because this is on the northwest side of Kyiv, basically a suburb of Kyiv, about 40 miles from the city. And it was, again, the playbook by the Russians to try and come in from the southwest as a way to encircle. They've got forces up on the north, so this is their way of trying to encircle the capital. The Ukrainians have pushed back. It's significant because, look, a tabloid that's a pro-Kremlin tabloid released, I don't know if it's accidentally released these numbers. Nevertheless, they released numbers that close to about 10,000 Russians have so far died. About 16,000 plus have been injured. The latest numbers from the Ukraine armed forces is that they've lost 99 planes, about 123 helicopters, about 509 tanks, about 252 artillery pieces, almost 2,000 armored personnel carriers. They are clearly on their heels, and they're struggling from a land offensive. So the Ukrainians using this 32-hour curfew time to go after positions in Irpin, in Bucha, in Kharkiv. Again, this whole idea of pushing the Russians back almost a month since they launched their invasion, pushing them back further and further away from the capital city.
George, there's concern Russia is preparing to escalate its air and sea operations to make up for land setbacks. What are you hearing?
Look, this is what happens when you are the attacker and you are failing to fulfill and accomplish your military objectives. You get desperate, and just like President Biden said, that the Ukrainians, the Russians rather, are getting desperate. It's a sign of frustration, and so they're not making any land military achievements. In fact, they're getting pushed back, as I mentioned, so they get desperate. And so what you have seen in the last, I'd say about 2 weeks, is that they are increasingly targeting civilian locations, whether it's hospitals, churches, schools, maternity locations. And you see what's happening today in Mariupol. It's been obliterated beyond recognition. And the Russians, they don't care. You clearly see this. They've surrounded Mariupol. The Ukrainians are standing firm in the city without no water, no electricity, no food. But this is the Russian playbook. They can't win on the land. And so the concern is that they will begin a sea and air assault. In fact, the Department of Defense said just in the last few hours that they are in serious consultation with their allies in the region to provide the Ukrainians with long-range air defenses that would, in essence, protect the capital city and these other places. Right now, Russians have positioned themselves, in areas that their artillery and missiles can hit places like Kyiv. But the idea from the U.S. is that they're trying to give the Ukrainians the necessary air defenses, long-range air defenses, that would potentially protect these key cities from missile and artillery fire.
All right, George Thomas reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you so much for your reporting. We'll continue to stay connected for updates. Want to remind you at home that you can help Operation Blessing's disaster relief efforts in this horrible war and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Simply call 1-800-700-7000, and you want to say that you want to give to Operation Blessing's Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Simply note Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of your check, and you can text as well. Just text OB Crisis to 71777. You can also go to our website, cbn.com, or Operation Blessing's website, ob.org. Anything you're able to do is, of course, greatly appreciated. Here at home, Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson will face senators' questions for the first time today. Jackson listened to more than 4 hours of senators' opening statements on Monday, the first of 4 days of Judiciary Committee hearings on her nomination. Jackson will respond to senators' specific points today, including charges by some Republicans that she has been too lenient in sentencing criminal matters. And you can watch Judge Jackson confirmation hearings on the CBN News channel, as well as cbnnews.com and our YouTube channel as well. Over the weekend, Lia Thomas became the first known transgender athlete to win a Division I championship. Thomas formerly competed on the men's swim team at the University of Pennsylvania before she began racing against women last fall. Thomas won the women's 500-yard freestyle and worldwide attention. The university is now the subject of a Title IX civil rights complaint for allowing Thomas to compete against women. Title IX was established 50 years ago to protect women. Now those rights are being challenged all over again. Here's CBN's Heather Sells.
Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
A historic first, transgender athlete Lia Thomas won the 500 freestyle Thursday, beating Virginia's Emma Wyatt by more than a second. This despite never even qualifying for the Division I championship during his first 3 years on the UPenn men's team.
I didn't have a whole lot of expectations for this meet. I was just happy to be here trying to race and compete as best as I could.
Since Thomas began competing against women, much of the swim world has either publicly supported him or protested anonymously. His NCAA championship, however, has thrust him and the issue further into the spotlight, leading to a more public outcry.
They can't cancel all of you.
Some calling on women swimmers not to compete. One father tweeting that standing up for the integrity of women's sports does not make one transphobic. A Swimming World magazine editorial called the competition a charade and blamed the NCAA's rules. And a 500 freestyle swimmer who came in 17th and missed the top 16 allowed in the finals became the first swimmer to call out the NCAA. Rika Georgi says that while she respects Thomas, it is disrespectful for trans athletes to compete against women. Also, Concerned Women for America announced a civil rights complaint under Title IX with the U.S. Department of Education against UPenn.
And it can't be allowed that one side says, shut up, you're a bigot. There are real tensions and rights here, and we have to work it out as a nation.
The NCAA turned down a CBN News interview request today and pointed to recent policy statements which promise fairness, inclusion, and safety for all who compete. Whether or not it changes its current rules may depend on who keeps speaking up. Nance says that Thomas may have unleashed a new wave of parents who won't keep quiet.
All the swim moms that are up at 5 in the morning driving their daughters to the pool are saying, what was it all for? You're seeing all these students, these student athletes, these young women saying, how can I compete against a biological man?
The NCAA championships marks the end of Thomas's collegiate career, but there may be a second act. He told Sports Illustrated that he's planning on the 2024 Olympics. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Coming up, President Biden warns of potential Russian cyber attacks on the United States, but experts warn America is not prepared. We'll take an in-depth look at those concerns when we come back. The war in Ukraine could come right home to the United States, as the president and others warn. Russia could launch cyber attacks. America is shoring up its defenses against such assaults. And while government agencies and security agencies are rushing to fill hundreds of thousands of positions, obstacles like low salaries and bureaucratic delays are slowing them down. Caitlin Burke looks at the challenges to building a corps of cyber warriors.
Cyber protection is no longer optional. The future is now, and the war in Ukraine has escalated the threat of destructive ransomware attacks to an all-time high.
Think about the effect of one piece of malware. Russia literally has not tens or hundreds, but thousands of cyber tools that they could launch.
We're very, very focused on ransomware actors that might conduct attacks against our allies or our nation. Very, very focused on some type of cyber activity that's designed for perhaps Ukraine that spreads more broadly into other countries. Third is any type of attack that an adversary would conduct against an ally. And then finally, certainly our critical infrastructure.
As the U.S. focuses on defense, private businesses and government agencies alike are on the offense, trying to hire nearly 600,000 people for cybersecurity.
We've got a lot of gaps that have to be filled, and there are a lot of holes that can be exploited by malicious actors in cyberspace.
Jason Blessing, a cybersecurity expert with the American Enterprise Institute, says when it comes to this critical area, public and private sectors share the responsibility of protecting national security. A breakdown on either end could have dire consequences.
In today's society, everything is connected, everything is interdependent, and therefore everything is potentially vulnerable.
Jen Easterly heads up CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Tasked with key roles such as prevention and emergency response, Easterly struggles to keep her agency fully staffed.
We've done a careful analysis of all of the 20-plus steps that it takes to actually hire somebody into the federal government, which is way too onerous. We were able to reduce by 13% the number of days that it takes to hire somebody, but it's still way too long. It's over 200.
Another challenge, competing with private sector salaries.
At the end of the day, people want to come to CISA to defend their nation, but given the competitive environment, we also want to be able to pay closer to market.
Still, experts say the biggest overall problem is there aren't enough qualified people to fill all the open positions.
In 2019, in the US, you had about a bit less than 50,000 people who has been graduate from a master in computer science. And basically, if you want to do cybersecurity, you need to have this kind of skills.
The numbers just don't add up. 50,000 people to fill nearly 600,000 jobs. So the tech industry is trying to help fill the void. Microsoft, for example, is providing free cybersecurity curriculum to all public community colleges.
Basically, 70% of all the students in the US are in community college. So community colleges have a very strong role to be able to provide like enough training, enough learning to learners to be able to fulfill the workforce.
Kwame Yamyani noticed another problem is finding experienced educators to teach these skills.
The problem is if you live, like, for example, in the Bay or in the Peninsula in California, and you are really good in computer science, you get to get a six-figure job somewhere, like at Facebook or Google or whatever. So why you would be, I would like to say, a teacher in a community college?
Yamyani's company, Quasar, provides courses for community college instructors, enabling them to teach what's needed to their students.
Our job is to be able to provide to anybody a sufficient enough of training to have at least all the basics required to be able to protect our free world.
The hard reality is that there's no immediate fix. In the meantime, however, the average American can be an important first line of defense against a cyber attack.
You want to make sure that your online presence is scrubbed well. So this means enabling multi-factor authentication, either through text message or temporary links for your banking or other online services, using a password manager that utilizes local encryption so that you can just plug it into your browser and it will secure and help you have stronger passwords, and just be mindful of when and where and from whom you get messages.
According to Deloitte, 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email, a message designed to trick unsuspecting employees into divulging sensitive information. So the bottom line is that protecting sensitive data is no longer the sole responsibility of highly trained cybersecurity professionals. It's a job that falls to all of us. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Still ahead, we're going to hear from Lifeline Children's Services about the trauma the refugee crisis has caused for Ukrainian orphans. We've got that story for you when we come back. According to the UN Refugee Agency, more than 3 million people have fled Ukraine. Neighboring Poland serves as the epicenter of Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. The majority are women and children, unsure of when or if they'll ever be able to return home. And Dr. Rick Morton with Lifeline Children's Services told CBN's The Prayer Link program Ukrainian orphans are facing even more significant trauma in this crisis. Take a look.
The UN Children's Agency UNICEF says more than 1.5 million children are among those who have fled abroad. How is this war affecting children who don't have families?
I think particularly those children that were orphaned before the crisis, we need to understand that their trauma is being compounded. Most of these children have significant adverse experiences in their past, and they're now being uprooted and moved and frightened again. And so I think our attention needs to go to how we meet them in the midst of this crisis with trauma-informed resources to be able to help mitigate the effects of their displacement.
Wow. So what are Lifeline and other groups doing to assist these orphans in this crisis?
I think, the first thing that we've set priority on is helping children to be settled, helping families to be settled. Obviously, as you said at the beginning of this piece, the number of displaced people in Ukraine is epic. It stands to be one of the largest refugee crises that we've seen in recent memory. So Lifeline is helping to mobilize supplies and helping, particularly in the country of Romania, to mobilize churches and other ministries to begin to house refugees and to give them a safe place and a calm place to be able to land temporarily during this conflict.
Now, I understand, Dr. Morton, that some orphans haven't been evacuated and orphanages are actually struggling to meet their needs like food and things like that. What can you tell us about this?
we've certainly had reports of that over the course of the conflict. There was one situation in Zaporizhia that we were aware of where a local church elder actually took resources that we provided and went and bought out a grocery store in order to take those groceries to an orphanage that had been yet to evacuate. I think the Ukrainian government is beginning to get on top of this issue, and there are provisions that are being made for evacuation. But obviously, we want to see that children are moved out of harm's way as quickly as possible and moved to safety, so that we can then begin to help them to feel safe, which is one of the hardest things to do with people that have experienced significant trauma.
Absolutely. And what are lawmakers in the U.S. doing? I understand they're working to pass legislation that would grant temporary protected status to Ukrainians fleeing the war. How important is that right now?
Well, obviously, we want our country to join the world community. And I think as believers, we certainly want to pray. We want to be active and give at this time. But we also want to encourage lawmakers here in the U.S. to enact laws and to support policies that are going to help to care for the Ukrainian people and to help us as the church be able to have viable means of being able to care for vulnerable women and vulnerable children during what is an unspeakably difficult circumstance during this war.
Now, you can also see other important spiritual topics on the prayer link tonight on the CBN News channel at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time or the CBN News app. We'll be right back with an encouraging word for your day ahead. Stay with us.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
Welcome back. Time for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a message I hope will touch you and then encourage you to post tag tweet and share it with those in your circles of influence. God loves you exactly where you are. Your flaws don't faze him, your weakness doesn't worry him, and your pain doesn't push him away. In fact, they all draw him closer. With that word, reach out to receive God's grace and mercy and make this a terrific Tuesday. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com at any time. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And take time to reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and then come back and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.